Ethan never thought victory would feel so heavy. The war between humans and the alien empire had been going on for years. He had seen planets burn, soldiers vanish, and friends never return. When his unit captured a key outpost, the commanders called it a triumph. For his courage in battle, Ethan was rewarded, but what he received was not a medal, not honor, not wealth. He was given a living being. They brought her forward in chains. A tall alien woman, skin pale with a faint silver glow, her eyes sharp like shards of ice. Her wrists were bruised from the metal cuffs, and her hair, dark and tangled, fell across her face. The soldiers around Ethan cheered and laughed, treating it as a game. "This is your prize, soldier," one of the officers declared with a grin. "An alien slave, yours to command." Ethan stood frozen. He had expected a medal, or maybe a speech, but not this. He looked at the woman, and she looked back. Her eyes filled with fear and hatred mixed together. It struck him hard because she was not some trophy. She was a person. He could almost hear her silence, louder than the shouts of the soldiers around him. The men joked, "Lucky Ethan, he won't be lonely tonight." "Don't break her too fast, soldier." Another laughed. Ethan clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. But he said nothing, because to speak against the order would be dangerous. He simply nodded, took the chain, and led her away. Inside his quarters, the silence was heavy. The alien woman stood in the corner, back straight, head high despite the chains. Ethan noticed the way she refused to bow, refused to look broken. He placed food on the table, but she did not move. "You should eat," he said quietly. She gave no reply. He pushed the plate closer, then stepped back, showing he meant no harm. Slowly, she reached for the food, her eyes never leaving his face. She ate like someone who had starved but would not show weakness. That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay awake, hearing the soft sound of her movements, the clink of chains. He wondered what kind of life she had before this war. Was she a soldier, a leader, or just someone unlucky enough to be captured? She was not a prize, not a thing, and the thought made his stomach twist. The next day, whispers followed him. Other soldiers teased him, asking if he had enjoyed his gift. Ethan ignored them, but the shame burned inside him. Every laugh, every mocking word made him feel like he was sinking deeper into something he hated. But still, he kept his silence, protecting her the only way he could. Days passed. The alien woman spoke no words, but her eyes always watched. She moved with caution, as if waiting for cruelty, yet Ethan gave her none. He gave her space, let her sleep on the bed while he took the floor. He brought her clean clothes instead of keeping her in rags. Every small act of kindness was not out of pity, but because he could not treat her as less than human. One evening, Ethan returned to his quarters late, exhausted from drills. The room was dark, but something felt wrong. He froze when he saw her standing near him, her figure outlined by the faint light. In her hand, something glimmered, sharp and dangerous. His breath caught, his heart raced. Was this the moment she would strike, the revenge she had been waiting for? But then, she dropped the object, and it clattered softly on the floor. It was not a weapon, not a blade, but a broken piece of her chain. Her voice, soft and steady, spoke for the first time. "You freed me without knowing," she whispered, her strange accent wrapping around the words. Ethan stood frozen. Not understanding, not yet. Her eyes shone with something deeper than fear, something hidden, something dangerous. The silence between them felt heavier than war itself. And in that moment, Ethan realized this prize was going to change everything. Ethan stared at the broken chain on the floor. The alien woman's words echoed in his head. "You freed me without knowing." He did not understand, but he could feel the weight of those words. For the first time since she was given to him, she had spoken. And that voice carried not weakness, but strength. She bent down, picked up the chain, and placed it on the table. Then she returned to her corner, silent again. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing. Who was she really? And what did she mean? Was she testing him or warning him? The next morning, He found her awake before him, sitting straight, eyes sharp. When he placed food on the table, she took it without hesitation, but still watched him as if trying to measure his soul. Her silence was louder than words. Every glance from her made Ethan feel like he was being judged, not as a soldier but as a man. The soldiers outside continued their cruel jokes. They knocked on his door, shouting, "How's your prize, Ethan?" Another voice laughed. "She must be wild. Did she scratch you yet?" Ethan kept his door closed. His hands clenched. He wanted to shout back, but he knew silence was safer. The army was not kind to those who questioned orders. Days turned into weeks. Ethan and the alien woman fell into a strange rhythm. He would return from training or guard duty, and she would be there, always quiet, always watching. At night he gave her the bed, and she let him, though she never thanked him. Her pride was unbroken, and Ethan respected it. It was clear she was no ordinary prisoner. One evening, Ethan caught her staring at the stars through the small window. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and for the first time, he saw sorrow in her face. "Do you miss your home?" he asked carefully. She did not reply, but her hand tightened on the edge of the blanket. That silence told him more than words could. Her home was gone, or too far, and the thought burned. Inside her, Ethan began to notice details. The way she moved gracefully, even in chains, like a trained warrior. The way she studied every soldier who passed by, memorizing faces and patterns. This was not a weak captive. This was someone dangerous, someone important. But she was also someone trapped, just like him. He was trapped by orders, she by chains. Late one night, Ethan awoke suddenly. The room was still, but he felt a presence. He opened his eyes and found her standing near him again. But this time she did not hold a chain. She held nothing, only her gaze fixed on him, her expression unreadable, somewhere between fear and curiosity. After a long silence, she spoke softly. "Why do you not use me like the others would?" Ethan sat up slowly, surprised by the question. "I don't see you as a prize," he said simply. "You are not a thing." Her eyes widened slightly, as if those words were unfamiliar to her. Then her face hardened again. "You speak kindly, but kindness can be a mask," she said. Ethan nodded, accepting her suspicion. "Maybe, but time will show you who I am." For the first time, her eyes softened. If only for a heartbeat, she turned away, sat back in her corner, and closed her eyes. Ethan lay awake for hours after that, wondering what wall he had just cracked. The next day, Ethan noticed a change. She began to move more freely, no longer hiding every action. When he gave her food, she ate without hesitation. When he entered the room, her gaze no longer carried only hate. Something was shifting between them, fragile but real. But danger was never far. One evening, while Ethan was returning to his quarters, he noticed a shadow near his door. A soldier was leaning against the wall, smirking. "So Ethan keeping secrets," the man said, his eyes sharp. Ethan forced a calm voice. "She's just quiet." The soldier's smirk grew wider. "Maybe too quiet. Maybe. We should test her ourselves." Ethan's blood ran cold. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Stay away from her." The soldier laughed, but his eyes narrowed. "Careful, Ethan, people are watching you." Inside his room, Ethan found her standing by the table. Her eyes searched his face, reading the tension. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Ethan shook his head. "Nothing yet, but danger is coming." She nodded, as if she already knew, and for the first time, she said her name. "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra." Ethan felt the weight of it. Not a slave, not a prize, but a person. And in that small act, in that simple word, a bond began to form. But outside, whispers were already spreading. Soldiers who laughed yesterday were now watching more closely. And Ethan knew sooner or later someone would report them. Ethan repeated the name in his mind again and again. Lyra. It was the first time she had given him anything personal, and the sound of it carried weight. No longer was she just The prize. She was someone with a name, a history, a life beyond. The chains, for the next few days, their silent bond grew stronger. She ate without fear. She slept without keeping her back pressed to the wall, and though she still watched him with sharp eyes, there was no hatred left in them, only caution. Ethan began to feel the walls between them slowly falling brick by brick, but danger was crawling closer. The soldier who had spoken to him outside his quarters had not stopped. Whispers spread like fire. Men said Ethan was hiding something. Others said he treated the alien woman too gently. In an army where cruelty was the norm, kindness was suspicious, and Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before someone reported him. One evening, as he cleaned his rifle, Lyra broke the silence. "You do not belong here," she said quietly. Ethan looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You fight for them, but your heart is not with them," she replied, her silver eyes steady. Her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He sighed. "War doesn't care what my heart wants." Lyra's gaze softened, but then she stood and stepped closer. "You should know who I am," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "I know your name, Lyra, but not your story." She took a deep breath, as if choosing whether to trust him. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but heavy. "I was not born a slave." Her words filled the small room with silence. "I was a princess of my people, daughter of the High Council," she continued. "My world stood against the Empire, we resisted, and for a time we held them back." Her eyes burned with memory. But they came with fire, with fleets that darkened the skies, and they took everything. Her hands shook slightly, though her voice stayed strong. "I was captured, paraded as a trophy, and handed out like spoils of war, until I was given to you." Ethan stared at her, his heart sinking. He had suspected she was important, but a princess, a leader of her kind, that was beyond anything he imagined. "You should hate me," he said softly. Lyra tilted her head. "Do you command the armies that burned my world?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm just a soldier." "Then you are not my enemy," she said, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips, but before Ethan could reply, a noise outside the door made him freeze. Footsteps, hurried whispers, the sound of someone listening. He motioned for Lyra to stay quiet, but it was too late. The door creaked and a shadow slipped away into the hallway. Ethan's stomach twisted. Someone had heard, someone knew. Lyra's eyes hardened. "They will come for me." Ethan stood, anger and fear rushing together. "Then I'll protect you." Her voice lowered, calm but certain. "If you protect me, they will call you a traitor. They will destroy you too." Ethan clenched his fists. "Maybe, but I won't let them hurt you." For the first time, Lyra reached out and touched his arm. It was a small gesture, but her hand was steady, strong. "You are strange, human," she said softly. "Strange, but different." Ethan met her gaze, and in that look, something unspoken passed between them, something that tied their fates together. The next day, the commander summoned Ethan, inside the tent. The air was tense, the officer's eyes narrowed. "We hear you've been hiding things, soldier. Your prize speaks, does she not?" Ethan forced his face to remain calm. "She says little, sir, only when she must." The officer leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Be careful, soldier. Loyalty is thin and traitors are dealt with quickly." Ethan saluted and left, but his heart pounded. They were watching him, watching her. He returned to his quarters to find Lyra waiting, her expression unreadable. "They know," he said simply. Lyra nodded. "Then we have little time." That night Ethan could not sleep. He lay awake, the sound of Lyra's breathing steady across the room. Every choice before him felt heavy. To obey meant betraying her. To protect her meant betraying his own army. There was no safe path left, only fire. Near midnight, a sudden pounding shook. "The door!" Voices shouted, "Open up, Ethan!" The sound of weapons loading filled the hall. Ethan's eyes met Lyra's, and in that moment, no words were needed. The secret was no longer safe, and their lives were about to change forever. The cow. Pounding on the door grew louder. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his heart racing. Lyra's silver eyes locked on him, calm but sharp, as if she already knew what was coming. The voices outside shouted again, "Open up, soldier! By order of the commander!" Ethan tightened, his grip on the rifle leaning against the wall. He knew if he opened the door, Lyra would be taken, and if he resisted, he would be branded a traitor. It was the kind of choice that could end his life. He looked at Lyra, and she gave him the smallest nod as if daring him to choose. Slowly, Ethan unlatched the door and stepped back. 3 soldiers entered, weapons raised, eyes cold. The leader smirked. "Orders are clear, Ethan. We'll take the alien to the commander for questioning." Ethan's chest burned with anger, but he forced his voice steady. "She's done nothing wrong." The soldier laughed. "She's not a person, she's property, remember that." They moved to grab Lyra, but she did not flinch. She stood tall, chains still around her wrists, her gaze fierce. For a moment, Ethan felt shame, watching them. "Treat her like an object." He stepped forward, blocking their path. "She stays with me," he said firmly. The room went still. The soldier's smirk vanished, replaced with suspicion. "Careful, Ethan, that sounds like defiance." Ethan's hand tightened on his rifle, but he didn't raise it. "I'll take her to the commander myself tomorrow," he said quickly. "She's weak. She needs rest. If you drag her now, she might die. And then the commander will have nothing." The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertain. Finally, the leader spat on the floor. "Fine, but tomorrow, Ethan, no excuses." They left, the door slamming shut behind them. Ethan let out a long breath, his body trembling from the weight of the lie. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low. "You risked yourself for me again." Ethan shook his head. "I only bought us time." Lyra's expression hardened. "Time is all we need." That night, Ethan could not close his eyes. He sat at the table, staring at the broken chain Lyra had dropped days ago. His thoughts, twisted, torn between duty and something far stronger. He had sworn loyalty to the army, but every moment with Lyra pulled him further away from it. If he betrayed her, he would never forgive himself. If he betrayed them, his life would be over. At last, Lyra broke the silence. "You stand at a crossroads, human," she said softly. "One road is safety but shame. The other is danger but freedom." Ethan looked at her. "And if I choose freedom?" Lyra's eyes glowed faintly. "Then you walk beside me." The next morning, the camp buzzed with tension. Rumors spread that spies had infiltrated the ranks, that traitors would soon be exposed. Every soldier looked over his shoulder, suspicious of the next man. Ethan felt the stares following him, whispers carried wherever he went. He returned to his quarters only to find Lyra waiting at the window, her gaze fixed on the sky. "They will not wait much longer," she said. Ethan nodded grimly. "I know." Lyra turned to him, her voice steady. "Then we leave tonight." Ethan hesitated, the weight of her words crushing down. If he ran with her, he would become an enemy of his own people, hunted across the stars. But if he stayed, he would lose her, maybe forever. His chest tightened because deep inside he already knew his choice. He could not abandon her. Not now, not ever. That evening, as the sun set beyond the jagged hills, Ethan prepared quietly. He packed rations, a stolen access card, and enough ammunition for a fight. Lyra watched him, silent but determined. When he handed her a cloak to cover her chains, she accepted it without a word. They waited until darkness fell. The camp grew quiet, torches burning low, guards distracted with drink and games. It was their chance, but just as they reached the edge of the camp, a shadow stepped into their path. The same soldier who had threatened Ethan before, the smirk still on his face. "Going somewhere, Ethan?" he asked, voice sharp. Ethan froze, his hand hovering near his rifle. The soldier's eyes flicked to Lyra, then back to Ethan. "I knew it. You're no loyal soldier. You're protecting her, aren't you?" Lyra's muscles tensed beside Ethan, ready to fight. Ethan's heart pounded, the night air thick with danger. The soldier's smirk turned into a grin. The commander will love this. One word from me and you'll both be dead by morning. For a long moment, no one moved. Ethan's mind raced, his future balanced on a knife's edge. He had to choose now. Surrender, or silence this man forever, Lyra whispered so only he could hear. The choice is yours, Ethan. And in that instant, Ethan knew there was no turning back. The night air was sharp and cold. Ethan stood face to face with the soldier who had caught them. The man's grin was wide, his voice low but filled with triumph. You're finished, Ethan. One shout and the whole camp will come running. Ethan's hand hovered near his rifle, his mind racing. He could try to reason, but he knew this man wanted blood, not truth. Beside him, Lyra's silver eyes gleamed in the dark, her body tense like a predator ready to strike. She whispered, "If he speaks, we are dead." The soldier took a step closer. "You think you can hide her? You think you can defy the commander, pathetic?" His laughter was cruel, sharp, echoing in the quiet night. Ethan felt something snap inside him. There was no time left for hesitation. In one swift motion, Ethan lunged. He grabbed the soldier's weapon arm, forcing it aside as the man tried to raise his gun. The two men struggled in the dirt, fists and boots slamming. Lyra moved like lightning, her chains flashing as she struck. With a single blow, she knocked the soldier unconscious, his body collapsing in the dust. Breathing hard, Ethan looked at her. She stood tall, calm, even after the fight. "We have to move now," she said. Her voice firm. Ethan nodded, his pulse still racing. He knew the soldier would wake eventually, and when he did, the whole camp would be after them. They moved quickly through the shadows, weaving between tents and watchtowers. Every step felt like walking on glass. The camp was alive with faint voices, guards laughing, dice rolling, torches flickering in the wind. Ethan's hand never left his rifle, his eyes scanning for danger. Lyra walked beside him, silent, but alert, her movements precise and careful. When they reached the outer fence, Ethan pulled out the stolen access card. The gate's scanner blinked red for a moment, then turned green with a soft click. He pushed it open slowly, the creak of metal sounding louder than thunder in his ears. They slipped through, and for the first time, Ethan felt the open night sky above him without chains of duty pulling him down. But freedom was not yet theirs. From the watchtower above, a guard shifted, his lantern swinging. The light swept across the field, landing on Ethan and Lyra. "Hey, who goes there?" the guard shouted. Reaching for the alarm, Ethan raised his rifle and fired before the alarm could sound. The guard fell, the lantern shattering against the ground, sparks scattering into the dirt. The camp stirred, voices rising, weapons clattering. "They'll be on us in seconds," Ethan hissed. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the hills beyond the camp. Her speed was shocking, even with chains still clinging to her wrists. Ethan ran beside her, his lungs burning, his boots pounding the earth. Behind them, alarms wailed, soldiers shouting orders, searchlights cutting through the night. They reached a rocky ridge, scrambling up as bullets cracked against the stones. Ethan turned, firing a few shots to slow their pursuers. Lyra climbed ahead of him, pulling herself up with raw strength. When Ethan reached the top, she extended her hand, gripping his tightly. Pulling him over, they collapsed behind the rocks, gasping for air. Below them, soldiers spread out like ants, torches glowing as they searched. Lyra looked down at the chaos, her face unreadable. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. Ethan nodded, his chest still heaving. "We can't stop. They'll chase us until we're dead." Lyra's silver eyes burned with determination. "Then we must stay ahead of them, always." For hours they pushed through the wilderness. The night stretched long, filled with the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. When dawn finally broke, the horizon glowed red and gold, painting the sky with fire. They stopped only when their legs could carry them no further, collapsing in the shadow of jagged cliffs. Ethan drank from his canteen, then passed it to Lyra. She took it without hesitation, drinking deeply before handing it back. For the first time, he saw her shoulders relax, if only for a moment. "You could have left me," she said softly. Ethan met her gaze. "I told you, you're not a prize, not a thing, you're someone worth fighting for." Her eyes softened. The icy walls around her breaking slightly, she whispered, "Strange human." But this time, her tone carried no bitterness, only something almost gentle. Ethan smiled faintly, though exhaustion weighed on him like chains. Their moment of peace lasted only minutes. From the distance, the faint roar of engines echoed, dropships flying low, searching the cliffs. Lyra's expression turned sharp again. "They will never stop, Ethan, do you understand? Once you chose me, you chose war, against your own kind." Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice steady. "Then I'll fight it, no matter what it takes." Lyra studied him, her expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. "You may be human, but perhaps you carry the heart of my people," she said, her voice almost proud. Above them, the dropships grew louder, closer. Dust swirled across the cliffs as the hunt closed. And again Ethan gripped his rifle. Lyra raised her chained hands, her eyes glowing faintly with hidden power. And together, they prepared to face whatever came next. The roar of the dropships grew louder as the morning light spread across the cliffs. Ethan pressed his back against the stone, his rifle steady in his hands. Beside him, Lyra stood tall, her silver eyes glowing faintly, her chained wrists raised, like she carried some hidden storm within her. The hunt was closing in, and their only chance was to keep moving. When the first dropship swept overhead, searchlights cutting through the rocks, Ethan fired. Bullets tore into the metal hull, sparks flashing in the sky. The craft wavered, pulling away with alarms blaring. Lyra moved with him, fast and precise, guiding him through cracks and paths only she seemed to notice. She was not only surviving, she was leading. For hours they climbed higher into the cliffs, soldiers chasing them from below. Every time Ethan's legs threatened to give out, he pushed harder, watching Lyra's determination. Even in chains, even hunted, she carried herself like a queen, and slowly Ethan realized he was not just protecting her anymore, he was following her, trusting her. When the sun finally sank behind the mountains, they found shelter in a hollow cave. The air was cold, but it was hidden, a small break from the endless pursuit. Ethan lit a small fire, the flames painting shadows. Across the stone walls, Lyra sat near the entrance, watching the horizon. Her chains clinked softly with every movement, a reminder of the world they had escaped. "You should rest," Ethan said, handing her a piece of dried ration. She took it, her fingers brushing his for the first time without hesitation. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "You risk everything for me, but why?" Ethan paused, looking at her in the firelight. "Because it's right," he answered simply. Her eyes studied him, searching, testing. Then she nodded slowly, as if accepting something she had been fighting against. As the night grew colder, Ethan offered her his cloak. At first she refused, pride, keeping her shoulders straight, but when he draped it gently around her, she did not remove it. For a long time they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. The bond between them deepened not through words but through trust. The next day, they continued their escape, traveling across rough ground and narrow paths. At times, Ethan stumbled, exhaustion pulling at him, but Lyra reached for his arm, steadying him. Her strength surprised him, not only physical but something deeper. Every time she caught him, every time she stayed by his side, Ethan felt the truth grow clearer. He was no longer protecting her out of duty. He was staying because he could not imagine leaving her. That evening, they were ambushed. A squad of soldiers spotted them near a dried riverbed, rifles blazing. Ethan fired back, covering their retreat. But the enemy pressed hard. Lyra moved like a shadow, chains whipping as she struck, disarming one soldier, slamming another into the dirt. Her power was raw, dangerous, almost terrifying. But when Ethan was knocked to the ground, a soldier aiming point blank at him, Lyra threw herself between them. The shot rang out and Lyra fell with a cry. "Lyra!" Ethan shouted, pulling her close, firing at the attacker with rage in his chest. The soldiers scattered, retreating into the distance, but Ethan barely noticed. Blood stained Lyra's side, her silver glow flickering faintly. She clutched his arm, her voice weak but steady. "Do not "Leave me," she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened, fear clawing at him. "I'm not leaving you, not ever," he said fiercely, pressing a bandage to her wound. His hands shook, his heart pounding. The thought of losing her felt like losing the air in his lungs. All night, Ethan cared for her, keeping the fire low, watching her pale face as she slept. Every breath she took was a relief, every stir a sign of hope. He whispered to her, even when she could not hear, "You're not a prize, not a slave. You're Lyra, and I'll fight for you until the end." By morning, Lyra's eyes opened weakly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You are a fool, Ethan," she said, but there was a faint smile on her lips. "A fool who stays," he answered softly. Her hand gripped his, fragile but firm, and for the first time her walls fully cracked, but their peace was short-lived. In the distance, the sound of engines returned, louder than before. This time it was not a single dropship, but many. The sky rumbling with their approach, Lyra forced herself to sit up, pain flashing across her face. "They will not stop, not until one of us is dead," she said, her voice sharp again. Ethan loaded his rifle, his jaw set. "Then let them come," he said, his eyes burning with the same fire he saw in hers. Together, wounded but unbroken, they stood at the mouth of the cave. The bond between them no longer silent, no longer uncertain, but strong, and as the horizon darkened with approaching ships, Ethan knew their fight was only beginning. The sky was heavy with fire, dropships swarming above like vultures. Ethan gripped his rifle, the metal hot in his hands. Beside him, Lyra stood pale and wounded, but her eyes burned with defiance. Together they faced the endless storm. The first wave of soldiers rushed into the canyon, their boots pounding against the stone. Ethan fired shot after shot, each bullet finding its mark. Lyra moved like a shadow, her chains whipping through the air, breaking weapons, tearing through armor. Her strength was fierce, but her body trembled from the wound she had suffered. Still, she refused to fall. "Go!" Ethan shouted, firing over her shoulder. "Save yourself." Lyra turned to him sharply, her silver eyes flashing. "I am no slave to run, Ethan," she growled. "If you fall, I fall with you." The words struck him harder than the roar of gunfire. She was not fighting for freedom anymore. She was fighting for him. The battle raged until smoke filled the canyon, until Ethan's arms ached, until Lyra's chains were red with blood. But no matter how many they defeated, more soldiers came. The Empire would not stop, not until Lyra was returned or destroyed, and Ethan with her. At last, as dawn broke, the gunfire faded, the enemy pulled back, regrouping for another assault. Ethan collapsed against the rock, gasping for breath. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand pressing against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Her voice was softer now, tired but steady. "You are a fool, but you are my fool," she whispered. Ethan stared at her, surprised by the words. Something inside him shifted, something that had been growing since the night she first spoke his name. In this war, in this chaos, something impossible had been born between them, and he could not deny it any longer. He reached for her hand, his voice rough. "Lyra, I don't see you as a prize or a chain. I see you as the only reason I keep fighting." Her breath caught, her eyes widening. For the first time, she did not look like a warrior or a prisoner, but like someone who wanted to believe. Slowly, her fingers tightened around his. "You dare speak of love in the middle of death," she said. But her lips curved into the faintest smile. That night, while the world burned around them, they made a vow. Not with witnesses, not with papers, but with their hands clasped and their hearts open. Ethan swore to protect her, not as a soldier guarding a prisoner, but as a man choosing his partner. Lyra swore to stand with him, not as a slave, forced to obey, but as a woman who had chosen her equal. The bond sealed in whispers and fire was stronger than chains, stronger than war. Days turned into weeks as they fled deeper into the mountains, sometimes hunted, sometimes hiding, sometimes fighting. But wherever they went together. Ethan carried her when her wound slowed her steps. And Lyra guided him when his path faltered. They became more than allies, more than survivors. They became two souls bound together. At last, they reached the hidden valley, a place untouched by the war. The air was clear, the rivers ran clean, and for the first time in years, silence surrounded them. It was here that Ethan knelt before her, his voice steady but his heart trembling. "I have nothing to give you but myself," he said. "But if you will have me, I want you as my wife." Lyra's eyes filled with a light he had never seen before, a glow warmer than the silver fire of her skin. "You are still a fool." "Ethan," she whispered, "but you are mine." Their union was not marked with crowns or ceremonies, but with a single kiss beneath the stars. In that moment, the chains that had once bound her were nothing but broken memories. And Ethan knew that whatever came next, they would face it together as husband and wife. But the Empire was not blind. In the distance across the valley, ships still prowled, their search never ending. War was not finished. Their enemies were not gone. And both Ethan and Lyra knew their peace was only borrowed time, as they stood hand in hand, the wind carrying the scent of smoke from faraway battles. Ethan whispered, "Let them come, because now they're not fighting a soldier and a slave." Lyra tightened her grip, her silver eyes fierce. "They're fighting a husband and a wife." And with that, their story of chains and freedom turned into a story of love and defiance, a story that would shake the Empire itself.